So to start off, by a raise of hands, how many people here would self-describe as a perfectionist? Ambitious. A high achiever. Have difficulty letting go of control. Difficulty delegating. Okay, just so you know, my hand is up on all of these as well. So the reason I bring these up is because these personality traits depict which individuals are more at risk to burn out. It does not necessarily mean that you will burn out, but it does mean that you need to be aware of where these traits could lead you should you not implement some stress-reducing tips into your life now. So in North America, I believe we've been duped. I believe we've been culturally led a belief that in order for us to succeed in our work, we need to fail in our health. And I'll explain what this means. We've been taught that in order to do well in your job or to climb the corporate ladder, you need to work late, you need to do overtime, you need to work when you're sick, because God forbid, what would people think if you actually, stayed home with a cold? We eat out to maximize working time. We don't take vacations in North America compared to our European friends because the opportunity cost of going on vacation isn't worth the 700 emails when we come back. We're living in a time where we value screen time more than cooking time. We value working more than playing, socializing, exercising, seeing our friends and family. And we're living in a time where we glorify being busy, not productive. So I believe that in order for us to succeed in our work or in our careers, we have to exceed in our health. How do you expect to do well in your job or go after promotions if you're tired all the time? You can't get out of bed. You're dealing with depression, anxiety. You need to be fueling your body with amazing nutrition so you can actually succeed in your work. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? More or less, okay. So to start off you can't really see the photo here so well, but to give you a little brief intro into my background and why I do what I do, before I became a nutritionist, I used to work in the corporate world myself. And this picture is from a time back in my mid-20s when I used to work for the French government tourist office in Montreal. And I had a very, very high prestigious role. I was in charge of all the promotion of France as a tourist destination to both French and English Canada. And so on the outside, it looked very glamorous. I worked between Montreal and Paris. I got to work, this is the ex-Prime Minister of France. I worked with the ambassador and any luxury French brand you could think of, Chanel, Hermès, L'Occitane. I was working with all of them. So on the outside, it looked like I had it all, but on the inside, I was crumbling. At that time in my life, I did not know how to deal with my stress. I was completely overwhelmed by the amount of work I had. And in order to compensate, I would work late hours until 11 p.m. And the joke was the security would turn all the lights off in the building and I'd be working by the light of my laptop every night. And this went on for a while. And in my head, I just kept telling myself I was bad, I wasn't good enough. I kept comparing myself to this image of a person I'd created on my shoulder that I should be faster, I should be doing it better, I should be doing, even though I'd never met an image of this person before, but I kept comparing myself to this person. And so as time went on, I got to the point where I externalized all my issues. I thought all my issues were with my company. So I decided to jump ship. And what do you do when you want to de-stress? What did I do? I went to an ad agency because that makes so much sense if you really want to de-stress. But in the next position, I started to realize that the problem wasn't them, it was me and how I dealt with stress. And it got so bad that it started affecting my health. I started having trouble getting out of the bed in the morning, and not because I didn't want to go to work, but because I literally had no energy to get out of bed. I could not function without coffee during the day. And it also became my little way of how I would actually, it was kind of like the little joy that I had was I'd procrastinate from work by going down to get my latte at a little cafe. I was starting to put on a ton of weight, specifically around the belly, and as I'll explain, it was all due to stress-related weight gain. I was dealing with a lot of depression. I was getting sick all the time. But, I started seeing the doctors and everything, but, all they would do is just offer me drugs. But deep down, I knew something else was wrong. physically in me, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to explain it. And eventually what happened was I just thought I needed a trip, so I went away to Cuba with a colleague, but it was when I was sitting in a tour bus, I just completely started crying. And it was at that moment that I knew I'd completely burnt out and something was wrong. So when I went back, I saw the doctors. I said, I need to go on stress leave. I can't live like this anymore. I need time off. I was blackmailed or bribed. So in order for me to get the little note to give to HR department, I had to go on antidepressants. I had to go on sleeping medications because they didn't believe that I was really burnt out unless I took the prescription. And that was really hard for me because I knew deep down I was depressed, but that wasn't the issue. I knew there was something else going on, and it wasn't until I actually, walked away from my career, and, it took a big process to go back to school, but I ended up back in nutrition school, and I ended up finding out what really happened to me, which I'm going to be explaining about today. But there's a reason why I serve people who burned out, because I've been through it, I know what it's like, and I know that you can't get the true health that you need in our healthcare system, unfortunately. So, this said, my mission in my practice is to serve professional men and women across North America, to help them overcome stress, the physical damage that stress and burnout cause on their body, by actually getting to the root cause and healing and correcting the damage so that they can regain their health, their energy, and their happiness. So I want you to get excited now because we're actually going to get into some really great content. So we're going to be talking about stress, but we're going to talk about it from a different perspective that you probably haven't seen or heard before. So to start off, we'll just briefly go over a few stats. So Canada is actually the third highest country in the entire developed world for antidepressant use. About 10% of our population are on antidepressants. 79 to 90% of all visits to a healthcare practitioner in North America are for stress-related illnesses. 60% of all drugs prescribed in Canada are for stress or heart disease-related illnesses, and I will explain how stress can actually cause heart disease. And 1 million North Americans are absent every day due to stress. So I think it's safe to say we're living in an extremely stressed out culture. And what do we know about stress? As Alan was mentioning earlier, stress increases our risk of all these diseases. Cancer, so breast being number one for women in Canada. It increases our risk of heart disease, which is a heart attack or stroke. Type 2 diabetes. So yes, you can actually be a thin person and get type 2 diabetes because of the effect that stress has on your blood sugar. Depression and anxiety. So one of the things I hear quite often is we're under more stress than we've ever been before. The stress we're under is so much worse than what it used to be. And I actually don't agree with that. Because if we go back to the days of caveman, when caveman was stressed, it was because he was being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So when caveman was stressed, it was for life or death situations. Today we're stressed because we forgot our iPhone charger at home, or because the idiot driver in front of us is driving too slow in the far left-hand lane, or because we have 5 minutes to finish a PowerPoint presentation before the client arrives and we still haven't had lunch yet. So the stressors we're dealing with today are much more superficial than what they used to be. Now that's not to say that there aren't some legitimate stresses. We're dealing with aging parents, we're dealing with financial things, job losses, but we're not dealing with life or stress things on a daily basis. And the problem is, the difference is the frequency with which we're stressed today. So today we're stressed every day, throughout the day, continually. And the problem is our body was not designed to live under or to withstand this amount of stress. And this is why we're breaking down and getting sick. So has anybody here heard of the adrenal glands? We got 1, 2 people. Okay. I'm not supposed to play favorites as a health practitioner, but these are probably one of my favorite organs in the body. So they're just these little yellow pyramid things here. We each have 2 of them, and they sit atop our kidneys in the back. And what the adrenal glands do is they are responsible for helping us cope with stress. And they do that by secreting stress hormones. So how many people here have heard of cortisol? We start to hear about it in a lot of magazines and stuff. We've heard of adrenaline. So these are just two of the hormones that the adrenals release in our body. So whenever we're under stress, it's the adrenals that are going to release these stress hormones to help us cope with stress. So when they're released, what the cortisol does, it'll increase our blood pressure, it'll increase our heart rate, it breaks down muscle to increase blood sugar to give us energy to be able to run away from the stressor. It dilates our eyes so we can see better. So it's basically preparing the body to be able to run away from the stressor, because how the body was designed is that when you're under stress, it's for a life or death situation. So we alter between two different states during the day. So if I pretend my arm is a pendulum, we're going to swing back and forth between these two states. So we have fight or flight and rest and digest. So when we're in fight or flight, this is when the body is stressed out. Okay, so this is when all those physiological reactions are going to happen. We get more energy, the blood sugar goes up, we're able to run away a lot better. The other state is what's known as rest and digest. So as the name depicts, this is the best time to be eating. This is the best time to be sleeping. It's also the only time to be procreating, because it means the body is not under stress. So we flip between both of them. So I spend the majority of my time with my clients teaching people how to get out of this fight or flight back into the normal zone, or to calm down so they can fall asleep again. So this slide is an absolutely great slide. This will probably be one of the nuggets that you'll take away with you today. So whether you're stressed because you're being chased by a tiger, okay, a life or death situation, or a Vancouver situation, you're being chased by a crack addict down a back alley in Gastown. I don't know if that means anything to you, but we have to run a lot sometimes. Or you're stressed out because UPS delivered your package to the wrong location across town, and now you have to fight traffic to go pick up your package. Your body is still going to react in the exact same way. So your body does not differentiate between life or death stress or superficial stress. Okay? Now the problem here is that when we're under stress, because the body was designed to think that stress equals a potential death, it does two things. What it wants you to do is it wants to give you all the energy to be able to run away from that stressor to save your life. But it also does two other things. It shuts down your immune system, and it shuts down your digestive system. So this is why people who are under chronic amounts of stress are always getting sick, is because their immune system is constantly being told to turn off, turn off. So this is why you see people, they start to get every cold and flu that goes around the office. If that cold doesn't go away after 1 week, then maybe around week 3 it turns into bronchitis or pneumonia. It's because their immune system is constantly being shut down. And it's also the reason why you start to see a lot of digestive issues start to occur when people are stressed. Constipation is huge amongst my clients. I always joke that stress and constipation are best friends. They love to hang out with each other. But this is, it's going to be the start of a lot of more serious digestive issues that turn into things like IBS or IBD and colitis and Crohn's. So remember that if you are stressed out for seemingly superficial things, you want to minimize that effect, in terms of how you interpret it, because it's going to damage you physically. The other thing that I love teaching people is that whether you're stressed because something has happened, whether the stress you're dealing with is a real stressor or it's perceived, your body will also react in the exact same way. So let me repeat that. Whether you're stressed because something has actually happened, or you're lying on your back in bed at night worrying about something that hasn't actually happened, your body will still go into that exact same physical reaction, which is going to break it down and have a negative reaction. Does that make sense to everyone? This is why it's so important that people, especially us women, learn to stop worrying, because worrying is going to have a physical effect on your body. So this is, we can't see it, but this is one of my favorite quotes that I share with my clients, is that worrying is like praying for what you don't want to happen. So when we worry, we're actually, it's almost like we're manifesting it to happen. We're praying for it to happen. That's why it's so important that you let go what you cannot control, because focusing your energy on that is more likely to actually make it happen. So I'm not used to this dry air, so pardon me if I have to keep drinking water, but there's two kinds of stresses that we deal with. So this is the stress that most people are aware of what's going on in their life, right? We call these external stressors, so anything going on in our relationships, work stress, our finances, our thoughts. These are things that if I were to ask you, what are you stressed out about, you would probably talk about these things, right? But there's another type of stress that people don't know about, and they're called internal hidden stressors. So these are things that are going on inside your body that are also contributing to physical stress. So food sensitivities, huge. This is why anyone that comes into my programs, one of the first things I do on them is run a food sensitivity panel on them. Because if you're eating food on a daily basis of which you're sensitive to, what happens is your body releases histamine, right? That's the inflammatory response. But in order for your body to get rid of the histamine, your adrenals have to secrete cortisol. That's how we get because cortisol is anti-inflammatory. It brings the histamine levels down. But that can actually trigger fatigue down the road. And that stresses the body out because it means the adrenals have to now secrete cortisol for this stress on top of all the other stress in your life. I'm going to talk a bit more about this later, but these are huge, and every single person that comes into my practice now and I test, everyone's testing positive for food sensitivities. It can be anything as simple as, wheat and dairy. Eggs are sky high. I'm seeing almonds come up. We're seeing a lot of bananas and pineapple are coming up, so weird things. Low blood sugar is a huge stress on the body. So I'm going to talk about this when we get into the mistakes later, but it's so important for you to know how to constantly balance your blood sugar, because whenever it dips low, that's a stress on the body, and cortisol has to be released in order to raise that back up. Parasites. So I see this a lot in Vancouver. I don't know about here, but we have a lot of people that go backpacking in Southeast Asia, Thailand. Is that happening here too, I imagine? Yeah. So a lot of people go off there, or they go down to Mexico, they come back with parasites. Sometimes parasites have symptoms, sometimes they're asymptomatic. The parasites will also be a physical stress on the body, which will damage it, but also lead to extreme fatigue. So I think we all know that stress is bad, but I don't think people realize how detrimental it is to our physical health. I always like to remind people that stress is worse than McDonald's. Everyone craps on McDonald's all the time, but I'm like, you are way healthier to eat a Big Mac and enjoy it than to be stressed out all the time. And I firmly believe that as a nutritionist. But stress is worse than all the pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides in our food, which are known endocrine disruptors, which means they disrupt our hormones. Stress is worse than GMOs, genetically modified foods. It's worse than all the worst environmental toxins you can think of, dioxins, phthalates, parabens. It's worse than alcohol, it's worse than fried food, and it's worse than trans fats. So that's why it's so important. This is, it's one of the reasons that we really wanted to put on this event, is to really get out there how bad stress is, but more importantly, what you can do about it. So these are some of the short-term health effects caused by stress that I see in my practice. So we see a lot of fatigue that's not relieved by sleep. So a lot of people say, okay, I'm tired all the time. So one of the things I say is, okay, is it because you have a newborn baby? Or if you were to sleep in on the weekend, would you still be tired? And that's what's coming up, is even if people were to sleep, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours, they would still be exhausted. Chronic exhaustion, coffee dependency. So I'm not talking about drinking coffee because you like it, or you like the little leaf in your foam on the latte, or you like, there's a psychological aspect. I'm talking about people that are dependent on it, where they literally cannot function throughout the day if they don't have it. Constant weight gain, especially around the belly, because every time cortisol is released, the majority of cortisol receptors in our body are unfortunately in the adipose tissue here. So that's why we start to see a lot of what we call the stress belly. When people are under high stress, as they start to grow the fat here. Increased anxiety and overwhelm, increased irritability with others, brain fog. So difficulty thinking, difficulty thinking clearly, remembering details, forgetting people's names. You know, you get to your computer to work and you're just like, oh, I can't think of anything, so you go off and get a coffee just to take a little break. Depression comes up, increased frequency of colds and flus, constipation and or loose stools, decreased productivity, so I'm talking specifically when you're trying to work. You tend to feel best after 7 p.m. Has anybody here ever experienced that, where you feel like crap all day, but you come home, you start doing the dishes, getting dinner ready, and then you actually feel the best you felt all day and you get a shoot of energy? Has anybody here experienced that? One person, okay. Or sleep issues or insomnia. So I see a lot of sleep issues around difficulty falling asleep, or difficulty staying asleep is a big one, especially for women. So we see that they wake up around 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. is very frequent. But do you know what the number one consequence of stress is? And that we now know that if you do not deal with the root cause of stress, you have an 80% chance of getting a disease within the next 2 years. So I'd like you to pull out that sheet I asked you to fill out a few minutes ago and check what your score is. So how it works is there was a team of researchers that put this together. They identified all the different emotional stressors in someone's life, and they were able to tell how much that stressor would impact someone's health. So if you scored 150 or less, they have determined that you have a 37% chance of illness within 2 years. If you scored 151 to 299, you have a 50% chance of illness within 2 years. And if you've scored 300 or higher, you have an 80% chance of illness within 2 years. So one of the things I find interesting about this is that the two biggest stressors on our bodies are death, so dealing with the death of someone close to you, and divorce. Hands down, the two biggest stressors. What I find interesting is that number 7 is marriage. It can be a cause of a lot of stress. So I'm quickly going to go through the top 3 stress-related diseases in Canada. So number 1 is cancer. Okay, so I think this is probably the scariest disease we have. We're all scared of it. We hear of it. We really don't like it. What we know is that 2 in 5 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer. 1 in 4 will die. Breast cancer is number 1 for women. So I found this out at a recent conference on stress about 2 months ago. And this really scared me because we now know that stress is the number 1 contributor to tumor cell growth. So out of everything else that we hear that's bad for us, this is the worst thing. This will grow tumors in our body. That's why it's so important and why you guys are so amazing for actually taking the time out to come here and learn how you can change this. Heart disease. So heart disease means either it's the narrowing the arteries, so we're looking at a risk of heart attack or stroke. So risk factors include stress, diabetes, high cholesterol, overweight, alcohol, physical inactivity, and smoking. But stress is the number 1 risk factor for heart disease. And anytime you're stressed, basically what happens is it's going to thicken your blood. And that makes it harder and harder for the heart to pump the blood out through the arteries and everything. And that can contribute to high blood pressure. So stress is directly related to high blood pressure. Number 3 is diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes. So, risk factors are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, being overweight, especially in the tummy. But what I want you to know is that you can get type 2 diabetes without even eating sugar. Because whenever you're feeling stressed, you are actually going to break down sugar. You're going to increase blood sugar in your blood. And that in itself can lead to diabetes. So what do we do? So in order to learn how to lessen the physical effect that stress has on us, we have to understand how it affects us in our daily lives so that we know where we can make changes. So this brings me to the 3rd mistake that I'm going to be going through today, and it's professionals that are engaging in these daily habits that are silently killing us. So number 1, and this is a big one when I start working with clients, is they're not eating breakfast. So this seems very simple, or not simple, but innocent. It doesn't seem very bad at all. But what it's doing, how it's setting up your day is actually quite grave. So basically, if you start off because you're waking up in a rush, you're late to get to work, so you try to skip breakfast, what happens is you're going to start off the day with low blood sugar, right? So when you have low blood sugar, you're not going to be feeling good, and then by the time you get to work, because you're feeling, that's going to spike your blood sugar, and then you're going to feel anxiety. So that is going to increase how you feel the stress. It's going to increase feelings of frustration, irritability, anxiety. And what we know is people that do not start the day with breakfast have a higher tendency of craving sugar or binging on sugar later in the day. So if you were actually to start off by eating breakfast, even if it's as simple as a smoothie with like protein powder, that is going to stabilize your blood. That is going to keep you calm. Your mood will be nice and calm, and you're going to feel less stress throughout the day. The next one is eating while working. I used to be horrible at this, and this is one of the things back when I worked for the French government. I remember I was the only Anglophone English speaker in the office, and I don't know how to say her title in English, but basically the top lady that ran our organization, she hated me because I didn't want to converse with the other French people in the office. I didn't want to hear about the foie gras that they ate the last night. I just wanted to, I thought in my head I was being efficient by working at the same time by eating my lunch. I didn't want to do overtime, so I was trying to get some more work done. And she would always come out and yell at me, my boss, Carmen, it is not normal that you eat in front of your computer, come eat with us. But I'm like, oh, lady, I don't want to have to do overtime tonight. I just want to get this document done or whatever. But then I get to nutrition school and I find out there's an actual reason why we never, ever, ever want to eat while we work. So there's two reasons. Number one, eating is technically, it should be considered sacred. So if you've been to Europe, you know how sacred food is over there, right? Because one of the things, especially women will say to me is, Carmen, like, I can't stop overeating. I can't stop eating. I don't feel that response when I'm full. And it's because we're always doing something when we're eating. We're typing, we're talking on the phone, so we're not actually present with how our body is feeling. So if you're not present with your body when you're eating, you're not going to know when you've eaten enough. So that's one reason. The bigger issue eating while working is eating while stressed. So there's two reasons you absolutely do not want to eat while you're stressed. Number one is if you're stressed and you're in that fight or flight mode that I was telling you about earlier, your digestive system is shut down. So your stomach is actually not going to secrete stomach acid. You're not going to properly break down that food. And what you're going to experience after lunch around 1 p.m. is you're going to have a food coma. You're going to be tired. You're going to be bloated. You're going to feel gassy, tired. You'll possibly be constipated later on. So that's the digestive reason why. The other reason you never want to eat when you're stressed is because your insulin response is going to triple the calories you ate. So what that means is if you ate 1 sandwich at lunch, your body is going to interpret that as if you had eaten 3, and you are going to pack on the pounds. So you never want to eat when stressed. I've really made it a habit that I turn my laptop off and I do nothing but eat. I eat in a quiet environment. Never eat when you're stressed, because that will bring up acid reflux. A lot of people get that. If they're around someone that stresses them out, you're not going to break down the food properly. So eat away. Go to a lunchroom. I have a couple clients here in Calgary, and I'll actually send them to a restaurant just to get away from their colleagues. So they're away from everything and they can actually just relax, eat in peace and calm. They will properly break down that food so you won't be tired when you come back after lunch. The next thing is not eating enough protein. And so we need protein. Protein is going to give us energy. So if you're feeling tired all the time, you need to look if you're getting enough protein for your weight levels and your activity levels. So you need it to, it's going to help balance your blood sugar, so you're going to feel more calm throughout the day. You're not going to dip down and feel tired, and you're not going to be anxious and irritated and frustrated. But if you eat enough protein, it's actually, have you ever, this happens a lot at dinner time, is you'll have dinner and then 30 minutes later you find yourself back in the cupboards looking for something to eat again, or you're looking for something sweet to eat. It's usually because you didn't have enough protein at the last meal. So I see that a lot with women, is like they're constantly craving sugar, and I can get rid of it just by increasing the protein at their meal. Is they won't have those sugar cravings anymore. So you want to make sure you're getting the protein, not just for the sugar cravings, but to stabilize that blood sugar throughout the day so you're more calm. So this is an example. When we go through the workshop this afternoon, I'm actually going to show you how to make your meals so you get enough protein and you're going to keep that energy throughout the day. But see, like a little salad like this, with these slices of white onions, this would not be a good meal to have at lunchtime because there's no protein in it. It's not going to fill you up. You're just going to be tired after. This is one of my favorite ones that I get to explain to people. I see this amongst corporate people. I see this especially amongst entrepreneurs, is you procrastinate pleasure. So this is me telling you, I want you to get more pleasure into your life. So what I mean by this is, when people have a ton of work to be doing, they might get a call, oh, we're going to have a dinner party, come out with us, or it's so-and-so's birthday, or, for me, it's like we all go down to the beach and stuff like that. But when you've got so much work, you put that off because you think of it as a luxury. And you're like, no, I'd be bad if I go. I have to sit here. I have to work. I have to cram until 10 p.m. tonight and finish this document, right? And the thing is, pleasure isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for the body. Your body craves pleasure on a daily basis because that's how you de-stress. And when you de-stress, you're calm, your body relaxes, your body can actually heal and repair. So I invite you to, in whichever form you want, is to bring pleasure into your life on a daily basis and stop procrastinating it to the weekend. So it could be as simple as a bubble bath. It could be as simple as watching a 3-minute cat video on YouTube if you're feeling stressed out at lunchtime. It could be whatever it is that makes you laugh. It could be watching stand-up comedy on Netflix. But making the time to actually see your friends, because one of the things I hear with my clients is that their friends start to get mad at them because they don't realize it, but you start canceling all the social activities you get invited to because you're like, I can't, I've got work. But the reality is the work is never going to decrease because one night you work till 11 p.m. There's always going to be more work. So you really need to take care of your body and make your body the priority and enjoy pleasure. This is not bad. You need this. This is another big one that I see is constantly staying up late every night. So, and I do actually have some tips for you later on in the workshop. So the issue here, besides the obvious, is if you stay up late, then you're not going to get enough sleep during the night and you're going to wake up tired. So we get that. But there's more issues around this, is you're actually, if you're staying up late until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 1 a.m., whatever it is for you, is your body's actually releasing cortisol to give you that energy to stay up and work. So that is going to put on weight, for one. It's going to make it very difficult for you to fall asleep. And what we know is that if you do not get enough sleep, you are going to have what we call a leptin deficiency the very next day. So leptin is a hormone that turns our hunger off. So if you don't get enough sleep, the next day you're going to overeat. And this happens time and time again. It's just we're not conscious. We don't realize we're doing it, but you're actually going to find you're going to overeat the next day. And this activity alone can actually lead to weight gain, as well as sleep issues. So what we know is that the best time for the human body to be sleeping is between 10 p.m. and midnight. And we always say that 1 hour of sleep before midnight is equivalent to 2 hours of sleep after midnight. So if you have to get up early for work or for whatever reason, it's much better to shift back and get to bed a little before midnight, because you're going to get a better quality, deeper sleep by falling asleep before midnight. And that just has to do with our circadian rhythm and everything. So now we're going to get into mistake number 2. And this is that you engage in the wrong solutions for stress relief, fatigue, and weight gain. So the first one is what I call supplement arbitrage. And the intention behind this one is actually a good one. It's actually coming from a place of someone trying to prevent issues. They want to do well. So what I see a lot of in my practice is people coming to me and they're just arbitrarily taking all these vitamins, supplements, herbs. They saw something in Dr. Oz. They read about something on MSN Health or something. And what happens is It's not to say that these are dangerous, it's to say that if you don't have the expertise to understand what they're doing, is you can actually cause more harm. So one of the things I see quite a lot of is people trying to self-medicate by bringing down their stress levels. So they hear of maybe adaptogenic herbs or something, they're like, okay, I'm under stress, I'm gonna do something about this. So they go off and they buy something, but unbeknownst to them, they're actually making their situation worse. They're actually driving their cortisol levels down lower when they already had low cortisol to begin with, and that's going to make their fatigue and exhaustion even worse. So you do not want to just willy-nilly be taking vitamins, or vitamins aren't the issue, it's more the herbs and the supplements when you don't understand what they're doing. They could have contraindications with medications that you're on, they could cause nutrient depletions of other things. So you really want to have an expert behind you that can build a personalized supplement schedule for your specific cases, because I see a lot of people doing more harm when they do this on their own. The next one is using caffeine or stimulants for a lack of energy. So I'm not here to crash on coffee, but here's the thing. We were actually supposed to get energy from two things: food and sleep. And somehow in our culture, we don't value either of those. We are not getting enough sleep, and we're eating out all the time. We're eating processed food, food on the go, frozen meals. And so now we're reliant on caffeine or coffee to get us through the day, right? So the point I want to make here is I'm not here to say coffee is bad, but we have to, it's bad if you are relying on it for energy, because then it becomes a problem, right? So we want to really focus on using food to bring your energy back and getting enough sleep so you're not dependent, because as soon as you become dependent on coffee, that is actually going to start a lot of other health issues down the road. The third one would be cutting calories. So especially when people are trying to lose weight is, too many people are counting calories, they're looking on the nutritional label on food, but they're not actually paying attention to the source of the ingredients or the chemicals that are in it. So, an example here is we can get any two foods down to any calorie that you want. You've got 90 calories in little baby carrots, which are going to have vitamins, minerals, fiber, they're going to do well for you. Or we can make a man-made brownie in a laboratory that can be fat-free, sugar-free. We can get that number down. But the way those two different calories are going to act in your body is completely different. The carrots will actually do some good for you, whereas that man-made, and when I say man-made, I mean like chemically made, is actually going to cause harm to you. So the point I'm trying to make is you don't want to just look at the number. You have to look at the ingredients too, because that is going to tell me so much more information about how it's going to react in your body than just a number. Because I can actually get people to increase their calories and lose weight. So food allergens. So I kind of briefly brought this up before, but if you're consuming food on a daily basis that you're actually sensitive to, that is going to contribute to fatigue. That is massively going to put weight on. Basically what happens is that I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a client to remove foods from their diet as soon as we identified them, and what happens time and time again is they lose 10 pounds in 1 week. And they haven't even started my weight loss program. It's because when you're eating food which you're sensitive to, it massively puts on water retention and inflammation in the body, and that is going to contribute to weight gain, but it's also going to suck energy out of you. So if you're dealing with fatigue or exhaustion throughout the day, it might be a good idea to identify if you have any of these, because it's the fastest way to get your energy back. Cutting fat. I never want anybody to cut fat. You can cut the bad fake fats like the trans fats and the fried foods, but we need fat. We just need it from the good sources of fat. The reason we want fat is it satiates us. It actually fills us up. So you want to have good fat in every meal that you're having, in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because it's going to fill you up. It's going to send a signal from the belly to the brain that you've eaten enough and your appetite will shut off. So it activates that hormone called leptin, which turns your appetite off. So good fats, avocados, olives, olive oil, coconut. You always want to make sure you've got some type of good fat in your diet. It's funny, but you can actually increase fat and lose fat. So you don't want to shy away from fat if you're trying to lose weight. You actually need it, and it builds our hormones. It helps our brain think better. We need it. Over-exercising is one of the biggest things that I see, especially in Vancouver, that it actually makes people worse off. Exercising technically is a stress on the body. Now, we need to do it. The body craves it, but if you over-exercise, you can actually do more harm than good. What happens is that you're going to over-release cortisol, and you're going to end up burning yourself out. So especially with like people that are trying to lose weight, is they'll be going to the gym 2 times a day, they'll be doing CrossFit, going to yoga, they're jogging every night. Do people jog here? Yeah. People are crazy for jogging back home, but you don't ever want to over-exercise. So don't go on this binge exercise routine, because what actually ends up happening, especially women, is they actually put on weight. And what I see a lot of is, I don't understand, Carmen, I'm going to the gym twice a day, I'm doing my yoga, I'm doing my CrossFit, I'm lifting weights, why can't I burn this fat? And I actually tell them to like cut it out, and it's at that moment when they cut it out, they de-stress, that the weight actually starts going. It's funny how that works. So I like telling people to stop exercising sometimes, but I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying don't over-exercise, because that's actually just as bad as not exercising at all. All right, sleeping meds. So this is a big one, because sleeping issues are huge, especially that constant waking up throughout the middle of the night. But sleeping meds are actually quite dangerous. I don't think people realize this, and I know you can't read it here, but I've put in this disclaimer here because it increases your risk of death and cancer. And compared with non-users of sleeping pills, one study discovered that those who took 1 to 18 pills of any sleep medication per year, so 1 to 18 per year, had a greater than 3-fold increased risk of early death. They also found that heavy hypnotic users were 35% more likely to develop new cancer. So if people are having sleep issues, it's really important that you work with a health practitioner that knows how to correct this. Usually what I'm seeing is it's blood sugar irregularities throughout the night, it's hormonal dysregulation. You want to get to the root cause and fix that so you can actually stay asleep. Because the sleeping meds, although they may be necessary in short terms, I'm never going to judge someone for taking them when something acute happens, but you do not want to be relying on them. There's so many other natural things you can do that have no effect. All right, bonus tip. Anybody here with sleep issues? Because I've got some goodies to give you right now. Do you? Okay, so I'm going back to this chart again, remember? So we alter between fight or flight and rest and digest. So when people does anybody have difficulty falling asleep at night? Sometimes? Okay. Usually what happens when someone can't fall asleep, it's because they're in fight or flight. So what's happening is that the stress hormones they're being kicked out, they're released, so you've got a ton of cortisol in your blood. So what happens is when your cortisol is high, your melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, is not going to rise, because they're inhibitory to each other. So if you're stressed out at night, melatonin, which helps you fall asleep, is not going to rise, and you're not going to be able to fall asleep. So it's really important to get you from the fight or flight into the rest and digest mode. So there's a lot of tips of what you can do to get into that mode so that your melatonin can rise and help you naturally fall asleep. So these are some things that might help. So let's start with electronic stimulation. So I always tell my clients never, at least 1 hour before you're trying to fall asleep, cut off all electronic stimulation. So laptops, iPads, cell phones, TVs, because that blue light that is emitted out of it actually stimulates the pineal gland in your brain, and it inhibits the release of melatonin. So when that blue light is coming out and stimulating your brain, you're not going to get the melatonin coming up, so you're not going to fall asleep. So no electronics 1 hour before. If you're like me and you still want to do it anyways because you're a badass, there is a really great app you can get. It's free on your computer. It's called Flux, capital F, period, L-U-X. And basically what it does is it syncs with your time zone, and it's going to naturally start pulling that blue light out slowly throughout the night. So it's going to become a bit more pinkish. You'll get a pink hue, and that will negate any of the bad effects of the blue light. So that's a really great tip. Another one of the reasons when people wake up during the night is because their blood sugar dips too low. And then what happens when your blood sugar dips too low? We don't want you to die, so your body releases cortisol to raise the blood sugar back up. But when the cortisol is released, that wakes you up. So what you can do, if you can try this, if this is the reason you're waking up during the night, this will work tonight. So is to have a little high protein snack before bed. So you could have a few almonds, you could have a boiled egg, you could have a few hard pieces of cheese, just to raise that blood sugar up so it'll stay constant during the night so you don't wake up. There are things you can do to help induce relaxation. So you can try some of the herbal teas that'll just help relax you. With my clients, sometimes that's not strong enough. So what I do is I get them to do Epsom salt baths. So Epsom salts, it's a form of magnesium. It'll get absorbed through the skin, and that'll actually help relax you, and that's going to bring you into that rest and digest phase. One mineral that I'm comfortable giving you here is you can get a form of magnesium. You buy magnesium. The form you want is glycinate or bisglycinate. I can show you how to spell that after. That will help induce relaxation. If you're physically feeling stressed, you take that, you will feel so much more calm. It's also great for headaches, cramps, muscle spasms. So you can take that. That'll help get you into the rest and digest phase. Some people are very sensitive to light. So if this is you, I would highly invest in the blackout blinds there, because if a car drives by and the headlights shine through your window, that's enough to wake some people up. So I would get that, or those sleeping masks. And I told you about the best time to be falling asleep is between 10 p.m. and midnight for the human body. So these are some things you can try. All right, so this brings us to the number one mistake that leads to stress, fatigue, and weight gain. It's that people do this. They burn out their adrenal glands. So remember I was telling you before that the adrenals release stress hormones for us. But if we've been living with high stress for a long time, what happens is that the adrenal glands are constantly releasing cortisol. And they, like you, can get tired over time. And what happens is if you're constantly stressed out and you've got all these stressors and you've got food sensitivities or parasites, is that the adrenals can't keep up and they're constantly releasing cortisol. And eventually they get to the point where they slow down and they burn out. And they're like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And that's when people start getting that fatigue, that exhaustion. They can't get themselves out of bed in the morning. They're completely dependent on the coffee. We see the weight comes up and everything. So I'm briefly going to show you what this looks like, and you can try to see if you fall into any one of these areas. If so, then it's going to help you know how to get out of it. So what we want in a normal, healthy individual is that when I measure someone's cortisol, their stress hormone, is the average human would produce a total daily output of 32 nanomoles per liter. You don't need to know that. But it basically means if you're stressed during the day, by the end of the day, the cortisol goes down, and that would be the max you'd release. But what happens, what I see a lot of, is what I call that nonstop multitasking professional on the go, go, go syndrome. They tend to have Superman or Superwoman syndrome, where they think they can get by on 4 hours sleep, drinking coffee throughout the day, homeschooling their kids, working 2 jobs, going networking at night, driving their kids to soccer, whatever it is. And they think the work will eventually die down, but it never does. And what's happening is they're in this zone, which I call the edge. So this is when you're overproducing cortisol. So when people are here, this is when they're feeling a lot more frustration, a lot more anxiety, irritation, stress. They don't deal with interruptions well. Their body is outputting so much stress hormone. This is a lot of women, the only thing they fantasize about is just sleeping. So that can cause some issues with their relationships. With men, what happens in this stage is their testosterone starts to dip. And no joke, but it becomes a lot harder to get and maintain an erection. So this can start to cause a lot of issues for men in their psyche. Things are starting to slow down. You're not feeling as good as you used to, but you've still got all the same demands as before. So what happens here is somebody will usually start to go to a doctor. I'm not feeling as great as I used to. I can't sleep. I'm putting on weight. My libido is gone. If they're lucky, they'll be offered some medications, and they may feel better. They may get some temporary relief. But then what's going to be happening is, they'll go back and they're like, I'm still not feeling good. And the doctor will run all the tests on them and be like, oh, your tests are fine. Your blood is fine. Your thyroid levels are fine. So the person's almost made to feel like it's in their head, but they know instinctively something else is wrong. And if they continue on, they get into what we call the disease stage. So when people get here, this is where their body is so nutrient depleted, so damaged by stress, that it has basically set up the perfect environment for disease to set up and thrive. And this is when people start getting diagnosed with breast cancer, prostate cancer. The digestive issues they were having before here are now being diagnosed as irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. So what I want to leave you with today, and we're going to go into a lot of solutions in my workshop this afternoon, is I want to leave you with a new paradigm of thinking about your health. So if you were to come home tonight to your house, and in your living room, you came home and there's a leak of water. There's a, what do you call it, a leak of water, a drip? A leak of water? The snow melted and it's dripping onto your floor, your hardwood floor, your carpet. What would be the first thing you would do when you see the leak? A towel or perhaps a bucket? Yeah. And as long as you have that bucket, you keep dumping the water out and you keep putting the bucket back, you're absolutely fine, right? But what's happening is unless you deal with the root cause, which is the hole in the ceiling, you are forever going to be dependent on that bucket. And this is how our medical system works. We never ask the question, what is the root cause of this? We just keep filling you with drugs to deal with the symptom, which is the leak. So the drugs that we're being prescribed is the bucket, and you're going to be dependent on them for the rest of your life unless you get to the point where you want to address the root cause. And that is what all three of us here do, is we actually get to the root cause to actually heal and correct the issue once and for all so you don't have to be dependent on these drugs. So, one second. So, I really hope that I kind of opened up your eyes a bit to how, we tend to put on, stress can affect us in terms of weight gain, fatigue issues, the stress affects us and everything. And of course, if you have questions, you can always come up and talk to us afterwards. So thank you.